Okay, class, we're about to start on section 2.4, multiplying and dividing signed numbers or integers. We have section A and B, multiplying and dividing signed numbers. Now, we come down here to these problems. We have positive 3 times positive 5, which is 15, positive 3 times positive 4, which is 12, and positive 3 times positive 3, which is 9. Now, if you notice, all of these numbers here have the same sign. So when you multiply two factors that have the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. That also works for negative numbers. Negative 3 times negative 2 will give us positive 6. Negative 3 times negative 1 will give us positive 3. Now, we look down here. Negative 3 times 0. Any number times 0 is 0. And we have positive 3 times 0, which is also 0. Now we come here to division. It's the same rule as multiplication. Whenever you divide two factors that have the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. So we have 75 divided by 5, which is positive 15, 48 divided by 4, which is positive 12, and 27 divided by 3, which is positive 9. Negative 12 divided by negative 2 will give us positive 6. Negative 3 divided by negative 1 will give us positive 3. Now, we look here at negative 3 divided by 0. We know any number except 0 divided by 0 is undefined. And then 0 divided by 3, 0 divided by any number but 0 is 0. Now we scroll down here. It says note, 0 for division has two different results depending on if 0 is the dividend or divisor, as shown above. It says here, now let's see if we can extend this pattern. Now remember, we had said earlier if they had the same sign and were multiplied, they were positive. But if they have different signs, if the factors have different signs, then your answer is negative. So positive 3 times a negative 1 will give you negative 3. And that's, of course, if you only have two factors that this principle works. Positive 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 times positive 3 is negative 9. Now, if you notice here, it doesn't matter if you have the number that's smaller or the larger or the same number, it's still going to end up being a negative number. And when I say that, we know 3 is larger than negative 1. So if we were adding, it would be positive, but with multiplication, it doesn't matter the size of the number. If it's two factors, one negative, one positive, it's going to be negative. Now we come here with division, same rule. 3 divided by negative 1 is negative 3. 12 divided by negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. Now we have these rules here. It says the product and quotient of two numbers having the same sign is a positive. The product and quotient of two numbers having different signs is a negative. The product of a number and 0 is 0. Now when we say product, we know product means multiplication. So we know that means multiply. Product means multiply. Quotient means divide. So when it says product, that means when we multiply and get our answer, and quotient, that means we divide and get our answer. So that's what those two terms mean. Now we scroll down here. It says multiplying or dividing numbers. Products or quotients are two numbers with like sign. Now if you hear we have two numbers or two factors that are positive, or the two factors which are positive divided by each other, and that will give you a positive answer. Now we have two negatives multiplied together and two negatives divided by each other, and that will give you a positive answer. So it says products or quotients are two numbers with different signs. Positive times a negative or a positive divided by a negative will give you a negative. A negative times a positive or a negative divided by a positive will also give you a negative. Now we scroll down here and do some examples. we had negative 5 times positive 2. So you know you had two factors multiplied by each other. So we know negative times a positive is negative, and 5 times 2 is 10. Now we have a negative times a negative, which lets us know it's going to be positive, and 8 times 11 is 88. Now, number 3, we have a positive times a negative, and we know that's going to be negative, and 3 times 4 is 12. Now we come to number 4. 0 times any number is just 0. Now we have negative 12 divided by 3. A negative divided by a positive is negative, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now number 6. Negative divided by negative is positive, and 80 divided by 10 is 8. So now, scroll down here to the next page. We have a positive 42 divided by a negative 7. Oh, it actually kicked back up to the other page. So 42 divided by negative 7 will give us a negative 6. Because positive divided by negative is negative, and 42 divided by 7 is 6. Now we have a negative divided by a negative, which we know is positive, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now we come down here to number 9. Now we have 3 factors now. So we have to treat this a little differently. So what we would do is we will go from left to right. This is all multiplication, as we can see. So we'll say 8 times negative 6, a positive times a negative, is negative. And 8 times 6 we know is 48. Actually, this negative should be inside of this parenthesis here. So I'm going to put it inside the parenthesis. That was a little error. So that's negative 48, and we bring down our negative 2. Now we know a negative times a negative is positive, and we can go over here to the side and take 48 times 2. 2 times 8 is 16, carry a 1. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So our final answer here is 96. Now we go here to number 10. We have a negative times a negative, which we know is positive, and 9 times 2 is 18. And then we bring down our negative 1. Now we have a positive times a negative, which we know is negative, and 18 times 1 is 18. So our final answer here is negative 18. Now we come down here to number 11. We have a negative times a negative, which gives us a positive. So that's positive 12 times negative 5 times negative 1. Now we have a positive times a negative, which we know is negative. 12 times 5, I'll go off over here to the side. 5 times 2 is 10, carry our 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. So we know this will give us a negative 60. We bring down our negative 1. A negative times a negative is positive, and 60 times 1 we know is 60. Now we go to number 12. We have a negative 2 times a positive 5, which we know is negative 10. And we bring down our negative 3 and also our negative 2. A negative times a negative is positive. 10 times 3 is 30. Then bring down our negative 2. A positive 30 times a negative 2 will give us a negative 60. Now we come down here to number 13. 0 divided by any number is 0 except 0. 0 divided by any number except 0 is 0. Now, a number divided by 0, a number except 0 divided by 0, we know is undefined. Now, we come down here to 15 through 18, which deals with exponents. Now we have a negative, and this is 9 squared. Now this negative sign is not taken to the second power, so we'll write our negative sign, and in parentheses we'll write 9 times 9, because only the 9 is squared. 9 times 9 we know is 81, so it'll be a negative 81. Now with 16, we have this number in parentheses squared, so we will rewrite this as negative 9 in parentheses times negative 9 in parentheses. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 9 times 9 is 81. Now we go down here to number 17. We have negative 3 in parentheses to the third power. So we could do this. We add negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9 times a negative 3. Positive times a negative is negative, and 9 times 3 is 27. So it's negative 27. Now with 18, remember this negative sign is not taken to the third power, so it'd be negative parenthesis 3 times 3 times 3. So now we'll say 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, and we'll bring down our negative sign. Now we scroll down here. It said, did you notice any patterns with multiplying sign numbers? What are they? I'm going to give you the patterns. The patterns are this here. And now, of course, I'm going to start off with except 0. Except 0. If you have an even amount of negatives, negative signs, your answer is positive. Now, let's prove this. Now we go up here. Now remember, the directions access when we're multiplying. So let's go up here. Look at number 11. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs, and it's all multiplication, and 4 is an even number, and you notice our answer was positive. Now we go up here to number 9. Number 9, we had 2 negatives. This is all multiplication. You notice our answer was positive. And remember, I said except 0. So that means 0 is not part of the problem. Now, what you notice here is when you have an even amount of negatives, you get a positive. But then if you have, we're going to put, again, except 0. Except 0. If you have an odd amount of negative signs, your answer is negative. And we can go back and take a look here. Let's take a look. Well, we can look here at 17. You got 1, 2, 3 negative signs. Your answer was negative. Just look at 2 more problems. We could look here at number 12. You got 3 negatives, that's odd, so your answer is negative. You got 3 negatives here, that's odd, so your answer is negative. So remember, if you have an odd amount of negative signs, your answer is negative. Okay, now, this question here, what are the rules for dividing with 0? Now remember, we already went over this in class, so you should be able to see that in your previous notes. Okay, just to go over these rules here, even though we went over this before, let's go over it now. It says, what are the rules for dividing with 0? 0 divided by any number except 0 equals 0. And number 2, any number except 0 divided by 0 is undefined. And here are your examples. Now, it says, are there any ways that you can help yourself remember these rules? Well, with this here, you notice that this is first, this is on top, and 0 is on the inside. So first, top, inside, you know that they're equal to 0. Now, if you look here, second, bottom, outside, they're all undefined. And you could pause this and look at this at your leisure. Okay, now we come down here to the bottom. Example set C. A card player had a score of negative 13 for each of 4 games. Find her score. So you would take negative 13 times 4. We know a negative times a positive is negative. 4 times 3 is 12. We carry our 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So it's negative 52. So you could say her score is negative 52, as shown here.